And blessed to be a part of your day. Before we get to our friend Robert Alt, we go to Keith on the bench. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Keith?
Hey, good morning, Kevin Miller. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, sir. I want to talk about the guy or the dad with the school bus incident. So I will relay my experience in life. Myself riding the school bus, my parents moved us out to a rural school as a child, and we had a bully on that bus, a child bully, and he was picking at all the kids on the bus. No parent stepped in to solve anything. The school bus driver ignored it. There were fights on the bus every day, and this kid was just a horrible bully. So I wish some adult had stepped on that bus to stop that bullying, but no adult did. And, so my mother, the bully started a fight with me one day. And so I defended myself, and I beat the bully down, even though I was much smaller than he was, because I was full of rage by being picked on for years. And, the school kicked him out of school, the bully, for 5 days, kicked me out of school for 3 days. And that was their solution. And so I talked to my mom about it, and she punished me at home because I got in a fight. Well, I talked to my dad. Dad, what do I do? Dad said, hey, son, if you don't defend yourself on that bus, who do you think is going to defend yourself? So my dad let me know I had to defend myself because no adults were present. So in a perfect world, we would have adults stepping on the school bus and making things right because kids can really screw things up. And this bully was picking on everybody on that bus. It's just that I was one of the few to actually defend myself. And I was asking my dad, where are all the adults? Help us kids out. And Dad says, son, if you don't defend yourself, who do you think will? So I learned at an early age, I'm responsible for my defense because there are no adults present to help out. So whatever happened with this guy in Post Falls, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing. On my school bus, I wish there were adults present, and there weren't.
Keith, appreciate the call, and you listen to KIDO Talk Radio.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Great story. Joining us now from Columbus, Ohio, Robert Alt, President and CEO of the Buckeye Institute in Columbus. Mr. Alt, you never know what you're going to get into when you join us here at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.
Well, always good and welcome for a surprise. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Well, we won't ask you about any school bus stories. How about that?
All right. That sounds good.
All right. So fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about labor in America today. Are unions really relevant anymore? We don't really hear much about them. We hear them during elections, but most of us here in right-to-work states, they seem to be a non-relevant factor. Are they?
There still are, even in right-to-work states, a number of individuals who end up being members of their unions, and that I think that particularly ends up happening in the public sector unions. Again, looking at that, the public sector unions, those are the ones that represent the state and local employees. Think about your school teachers. Think about your folks who are working for state agencies. But in those situations, there's an interesting statistic, I think, to keep in mind that shows a fairly serious problem, and that is that 94% of unionized workers in this country have never had the opportunity to vote for the union that's representing them. And that's because of the way union elections are conducted. It's a sort of one-and-done process. Once the union is elected as the bargaining representative for that unit, they never have to sit for re-election ever again. So let me just give a tangible example. Down in Columbus, where I live, the Columbus Teachers Association is the local teachers union. They were voted in as the representative of that bargaining unit in the late 60s. So, to paint the picture, Richard Nixon is in the White House. The Beatles are still together. But if you walk into the schoolhouse, the elementary school near where I live, the teacher who's standing up in front of that classroom, he or she likely wasn't even born in the late 60s. They've never had the opportunity to vote for that particular union. They've never had a voice or a choice, and most of them feel that because of that, it's very difficult to have any sort of accountability from those unions. And so what we recommend as a remedy to give them a voice and a choice is worker voting rights, which would allow for regular periodic elections of unions, of public sector unions by those workers. And this is a reform, I think, that would be welcome in right-to-work and non-right-to-work states alike.
When we take a look at, and you're talking about public sector's unions, but other unions, do they just, when's the last time a union has been effective? Perhaps when GM was about ready to be broken up?
In terms of that, I think you might see, you've seen some of that. The part of the question is, what incentives do they have to provide good service for their workers?
Sure.
If you go to our website, workervotingrights.org, we've got an interesting quote from, I believe it's the head of AFSCME, one of the big public sector unions, and they were talking about the conditions that occurred in a state before it enacted worker voting rights. And they said, look, we were taking our members for granted. We weren't even communicating with them. And at a certain point, I suppose the question is, why would they? It didn't matter if they provided good service, bad service, or no service at all. They were still going to be the bargaining representative. They were still going to get the dues, and they still weren't going to be subject to any competition. It's not impossible, but it's very impractical to actually change your union representation, to either get rid of a union or to change your union in a bargaining unit. Worker voting rights empowers the workers to be able to do that, and in doing so, forces them to be more accountable and effective on their behalf.
Robert Ault joining us here, Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. Like I said, it's been my experience that, they really take your dues, and that's about it. They don't really stop you from, keeping your job, maybe if you have a lot of seniority, but for people that are just getting in, it just seems like a money grab. And then you have the whole issue, Mr. Ault, of, we talk about this at KIDO Talk Radio, where the funds are going somewhere where you might not agree with what the union wants to do politically.
Well, and that goes to the accountability function, which is to say you've got a number of folks who work for these public sector unions who may disagree with how the dollars are being spent politically, or even how they're using them in collective bargaining. There was a big lawsuit went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court by a teacher in California, Rebecca Friedrichs, who said, look, how you're collectively bargaining, the fact that you are so opposed to merit, won't let merit be a factor in these decisions, that you're defending teachers who are abusing students. That's not how I want my dollars being used in the collective bargaining process. But again, if even in a right-to-work state, if you want to be a member of a union, for instance, but you're not happy with the union, you don't have a lot of choice. Worker voting rights, by allowing there to be these regular elections, would give that choice. And it's for that reason that 85% of union households believe that having these regular elections would create greater accountability on behalf of their unions.
How do you see this playing out in Congress? You have your old diehard states, the legacy states where the union still means something, and then you have, again, whether it's the South or the West, where a lot of people would question their relevancy, as we've talked about.
This is a reform. There's two different tracks it can take. It could go through Congress. There's been a couple of different pieces of legislation that have been dropped to address this. I worked in Washington for a number of years, and I left there mainly because I wanted to actually get something done. And to my sense, if you actually want to get serious reforms done, the much more fertile ground on that is in the states. And so, thankfully, this is a reform that can be enacted at a state level as well. Federal law allows state governments to require worker voting rights for public sector workers, and several states have already enacted that. So, my guess is the way that you're going to see this play out is the way a lot of reforms ultimately do, which is on a state-by-state system of experimentation, where the states can figure out what's best for them. They can go ahead and alter, how long in between the elections there are, things of that nature. I know in Tennessee, for instance, they experimented first with teachers unions. They didn't apply the vote to all the different unions, and they can see how those particular reforms play out. But I tend to think that the real action will be in the states.
Mr. Ault, anything else you'd like to talk about? Perhaps are you all going to beat Michigan this weekend?
That's the plan. We in Ohio, it all comes down to that particular game. So when you look at the season, it's all measured by that particular yardstick. So we're geared up for the game and feeling good. So, but it's one of those ones where I will tell you that it doesn't matter what the records are going into that game. We've seen it swing, the pendulum swing even when it was supposed to be lopsided. So you never go in overconfident, but we're all geared up here for that game.
And finally, can you explain the president's popularity in the ever-important bellwether state of Ohio? Is he still popular there?
Absolutely. No, I mean, this is one of those ones where I will tell you that on Election Day, I would have lost a bet if I did so on how the national election would come out. I didn't foresee some of the other states breaking, but there was no question that Ohio was going for Trump based on not so much on polling, but having driven around the state and seen the support that the president has. And I still think a lot of it just emanates from people being tired of, business as usual being done by both parties. And, a desire to actually, get substantive reform in Washington, to have someone in who will actually, make good on promises. So I think particularly you've got a lot riding on reforms like the tax reform bill that's currently pending. I think, a lot of people are looking for that to be a serious accomplishment. But you already have a lot of support for him for things like Justice Gorsuch, which, a number of Ohioans would look at as seriously delivering on a campaign promise.
Mr. Alt, we appreciate you, and go Buckeyes.
Go Bucks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kevin Miller in the morning here. It's so funny, the unifying power of sports. And again, let's just take a look at it from a non-sports perspective. We're not going to tell you about yards and scandals and, national anthems and all sorts of things. But we are going to, again, the unifying power of sports where you have two total strangers, and you mentioned somebody's favorite college, not professional, college football team, and you just have it there. There's something alluring there. And again, I think the liberal sports media doesn't get it, but there's a hidden gem there. And maybe we'll add it to our arsenal here at KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio.
It was a rhetorical response to a criticism by the father. Again, I think the president was happy to see the release of these individuals and have them back in the United States.
And there we have it, Sarah Huckabee Sanders on LeVar Ball. Now, if you don't know who LeVar Ball is, he's a guy that has a big mouth. His kid plays for UCLA. His other kid plays for the Lakers. He's one of these social media phenomena that he gets on Twitter and he says outrageous things. And, it's kind of like an old carnival barker or sports entertainer, wrestler. He says a lot of things. Well, his kid got busted for shoplifting in China. He and two other UCLA players, and aren't the Bruins proud of those players? Well, in China, they don't have the same type of legal system that we do, so it looked like they were going to be in the pokey for quite some time. Donald Trump happened to be over there. The president asked the Chinese premier to release them, and lo and behold, he did. And LeVar Ball said, really, Donald Trump had nothing to do about it, and as we know, if you go after Donald Trump, he does not back down.
I think that the president, like I said, was happy to intervene. I think it was less about the players and the father of one of the Americans really seemed to have a problem with it. Frankly, it didn't seem like the father wanted the president to intervene, which I think would have been a sad thing if he hadn't, most likely.
Yeah, kind of goofy how it all plays out, dear true believers, that the president does a good thing, and, if it had been Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, it would have been a little different. By the way, if you're just waking up, it's not a good day for Charlie Rose. Now you're thinking to yourself, Charlie Rose, does that name sound familiar? Well, apparently, good old Charlie, according to the Washington Post, had a proclivity for walking around without his clothes on in front of his female coworkers or his female subordinates. And now they've gone #MeToo to the Washington Post. Now, Does Charlie get the presumption of innocence? Apparently not. Old Charlie got the boot from CBS and Bloomberg. And I don't know about PBS, but it's amazing that Sanctimonious Charlie now is on the Roy Moore list. Now, speaking of Judge Moore, we'll continue to monitor that situation. And by the way, take your phone calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. I mean, what would happen if we had an Idaho judge accused of these things, or an Idaho politician? You know, I was talking to a political insider yesterday, and here in the Gem State, we're rather refreshingly boring. You know, we don't have those scandals and haven't had those scandals for quite some time. You know, our politicians, the big deal is that we have a new website out. What is it? sadchoiceforidaho.com. And on one hand, you have some stuff against the lieutenant governor, some other stuff against the congressman, and this is paid for by Dr. Alquist's campaign. And, you know, that's about the extent of things when it comes to our congressional race, or our gubernatorial races. Our congressional races is, you know, whether or not David Leroy should run for Congress, because he's lives in the second CD, and then he said he's leasing a house in the first CD. It was brought up by Representative Christy Perry that brought that up last week. It says she lives in the district. I mean, there's no hardball here, really, comparatively speaking. And then you have, 2,700 people running for lieutenant governor. Again, you look at what's going on in Alabama with Roy Moore, and no wonder there are a lot of people interested in this, including in the state of Idaho. So we'll hear from the accuser. She was on the Today Show yesterday, and we'll take your calls on who you find believable. And, you know, something I told you a little bit about yesterday, Ken Starr, the Republicans in Congress, and yes, even yours truly, Kevin Miller, we were vilified. We were vilified for going after Bill Clinton. So if we apply the Clinton logic that what you do in your private life after hours is okay, demeaning women, going after women when you're married that are young enough to be your daughter is okay, and gosh knows we don't want to relive what happened in the Oval Office. It'll never be the same with Monica Lewinsky. If that was okay for Bill Clinton, and remember, they looked at Paula Jones and Juanita Broderick as trash, well, then what's the difference between what Bill Clinton did and good old Charlie or good old Al Franken? At 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Let's think about that for a minute. Traffic and weather together. And Kevin Miller in the morning here as we continue. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up, a senator gets in trouble for, the bane of existence of all of us on the radio, and that is a hot mic. But currently talking about the situation involving Judge Roy Moore and whether or not you believe the accuser. You'll hear from her, one of them. And the idea of men behaving badly, and this all could have been stopped if people would have listened to me, to Ken Starr, and others when we tried to tell you how bad Bill Clinton was. How bad Bill Clinton was. Think about that. Here you have a guy that got away with it. Laughed his way all the way to presidential retirement. Everybody loved good old Bill. Aw, shucks. And look what he did to women. Now, do you think that if people would have listened to Ken Starr and the Republican Congress? Of course, the Republican Congress needed to stand up for themselves, because when they didn't stand up for themselves, when they didn't continue on with the impeachment, when they lost it, they became afraid. And this allowed people like Clinton, Franken, Harvey Weinstein, and others to degrade women. Now, Cindy called in, if you missed it, at 580-5436 and said some of these women should be responsible for their own actions. Cindy saying how people dress, how people behave, lead to some type of these actions. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up and take your calls as we call it, I guess, Bad Men Day on Kevin Miller in the morning. But back to Charlie. Where's the presumption of innocence for him, number one? And number two, the Judge Moore situation. If you were a voter in Alabama, would you vote for Judge Moore? You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good.
Time to get up, everybody. I see you in CUNA. Start dancing. Let's get up and start the day. Never too early to do the Running Man in Caldwell. The Theater of the Mind. Thank you all for joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning. And if you're home this week, welcome back to the Treasure Valley. Welcome back to Idaho. Welcome back to America. We appreciate you coming in. And if you're working, God bless you. We appreciate your sacrifice so that others can enjoy the holiday. Let's not remember let's remember, by the way, it's still a little weak from last week. Let's remember at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, to remember all those folks that are serving our great nation, who are away, who might be on a sub, might be on a carrier, might be in Korea, might be on a forward operating base. So different from where we are today here in the Treasure Valley, here in the warm, safe bosom of the country that we call America, that we love so much. Those people that are working, and those people's whose sons and daughters and daddies and mamas are doing their very best, whether they're first responders or in the military. Thank you. And again, of course, the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, for all those people that are working the retail, this is what we call the Super Bowl or March Madness, where not everybody gets the time off. So whether you work at a big box store, a little box store, or a small business, hey, gear up, get some rest, and we so appreciate your work. Joining us now, a man that openly admitted that he'll be working on Thanksgiving. I don't know how patriotic that is. Of course, considering where he's working, I don't think we can question that. John Decker of Fox News joining us from the White House here at KIDO Talk Radio. John, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm not going to go LeVar Ball on you, but we talked a little bit about that yesterday. It's amazing just how powerful, I suppose, John, and I'll ask you how influential social media is in this Ball story.
Well, it is, and they both LeVar Ball and President Trump have followings. I think I mentioned to you yesterday that LeVar Ball is sort of like the Kardashians of the NBA. I think that's an apt description. They both like the attention. So, this back and forth between the president and LeVar Ball is perfect for both of them, I think. And, I think both of them like to get the last word on these things.
Yes. Now, imagine sharing a Thanksgiving meal with both of them.
Well, the president is having his Thanksgiving meal down at Mar-a-Lago. I can recall, I don't know if you remember this, but last Thanksgiving, of course, the president at the time was president-elect, and President Obama, of course, was still in office. But the president-elect, now President Donald Trump, did something very unusual in that he put out his menu for Thanksgiving, trying to show up, I think, to a certain extent, what the president was having for Thanksgiving. And I guess you could compare the menus and figure out which one you'd rather be at based upon the food, and I guess for some people the company. But that's something that we don't have to worry about this year. I don't think former President Obama is going to put out his Thanksgiving menu. The president, though, with the first family, in fact, he departs today from Mar-a-Lago, so he'll be down in sunny and warm Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday.
Indeed, of course, a serious topic that is resonating across the nation. The president makes renewed calls for a border wall following another agent's death. What's been the reaction so far, John?
Can you do me a favor? Can you repeat that question one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure, we're having a little issues with the phones here this morning at KIDO Talk Radio. John Decker joining us from the White House. President Trump making another call for the border wall following the death of another agent, sir.
Yeah, so this happened, of course, over the weekend. A U.S. Border Patrol agent was killed. The circumstances of his death not exactly clear at this point. And another Border Patrol agent that was alongside him was critically injured. So he is in the hospital. And the president, in the wake of that, calling once again for the building of that border wall with Mexico. The president has asked for that in his budget blueprint. Congress has yet to fund that wall, and that's something the president continues to push. That, of course, is one of the main items on his agenda as running for president, and it's also a big legislative item that he'd like to see accomplished by this Congress over the course of the next year.
I heard they were actually looking at prototypes for the wall. There were several lately.
That's right. So this is being done by the Department of Homeland Security. I believe the leading candidate for that prototype is being built out in San Diego, California. But, whether they settle on one may not be necessary if there's no funding for the wall. You need that, of course. And there are certain places along the U.S.-Mexico border where you may not necessarily need a physical wall just because of the natural boundaries that exist between the U.S. and Mexico. So this is something the president is going full steam ahead on in terms of the design of the border wall. And maybe, once the Senate passes their version of tax reform, and I think that they ultimately will do that, then the president can turn his attention to these other items on his legislative agenda, including building the wall.
John Decker joining us at KIDO Talk Radio from Fox News Radio, live from the White House. Are people taking time off in the press corps, or are you still having the full rooms? I didn't catch yesterday's news conference.
Oh, yesterday was full. Yesterday was definitely full. And yesterday was the last briefing of the week. Sarah Sanders announced that there will be no briefing today. The president, in a short bit of time, will pardon the Thanksgiving turkeys, annual tradition. I think it's the 70th year of this tradition. He'll be there with the First Lady, and I believe his son, Barron, will also be with him as he pardons 2 turkeys. And then he's off to Mar-a-Lago, down to South Florida. So we'll see whether it's a quiet week. The president hasn't tweeted in the past 24 hours, so maybe he's already in that Thanksgiving mood where he doesn't want to even take to social media.
John Decker, we so appreciate your work, and I know it's going to be a little lonely Thanksgiving for you working that day, but we appreciate your efforts, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Well, we'll see. Sometimes there's busy times. You never know what's going to happen in the rest of the world, even though it might be quiet here in America. So I'll be here holding down the fort, and I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. And I will speak to you. I don't know if we'll speak tomorrow, but if not, enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday, and we'll speak next week.
Well, we'll put in the request, John. We'll put in the request. We'll see what happens.
Okay, is that the way it works? Okay, sounds good. Kevin, have a great day.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That's our great friend, John Decker. Let's go to Arvell in Fruitland with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Hello, Arvell!
Hello, Kevin. I want to weigh in on Moore's situation. Samuel Clemens, also known as Mark Twain, made a statement, and it was this: there are no degrees to the depths of our depravity except for our ability to conceal it. We're all fallen creatures, and we're capable of the worst of atrocities given the circumstances that we face. And I'm not so concerned about Moore's character 40 years ago. I'm more concerned about how he's dealing with temptation now. And temptation with women is called every man's battle, unless he's got his wires crossed somehow. But it's something we all deal with. And,
or unless you're Kevin Spacey in Temptation with Men.
Yes, that's the problem with someone who's oriented that way. But with every temptation, God provides a way of escape, and that way of escape is turning to Jesus. And if we have His Holy Spirit in our soul, and we submit to Him at the time of temptation, immediately He takes over and snuffs out that thought so we don't carry on with it. But my concern is if a person is still not dealing with his temptation, he's subject to blackmail, and it can affect his decision-making, as a president or an officer in the government. So
well, let me hit you with something, Arvell. You're a man of faith, correct?
Yes.
What do you want to say to all these reports of whether it's Al Franken or Charlie Rose or Harvey Weinstein or any of these people or Ben Affleck, all these men throwing themselves at women, groping them. What is that? Is that a reflection of society today, or are we just talking about a small amount of deviance?
Well, I think in our society today, the fear of God has been taken away. And so men and women are more prone to just giving way to their inclinations. And so now it's coming to the surface more and more. And it's part of just the direction of our society, which I think God is going to deal with in soon. And it's going to be real tragic in our country for what's happening. I mean, abortions and perversions, I can't see it lasting much longer.
Well, when we have a society that is motivated by, relations in and outside of marriage, unfortunately, that's where the priorities, tend to be. So it's getting back to faith, it's getting back to God, it's getting back to traditions and institutions.
I agree. It's getting back to God, especially. We read in Scripture that he who forsakes God, God will forsake him. And that's what we're seeing.
Arvell, thank you for the call, and thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio.
Well, thank you for taking my call.
Bye. Bye-bye. Have a blessed day. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And living the dream, blessed to be part of your day. Our phone number's 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Getting ready for Thanksgiving. Remember, on Friday, huge guest Pamela Geller will join us, and the returning Phil, as we like to call him, Philip Hardy from Washington, D.C. will discuss all things Idaho, all things politics, and looking forward to that. Can't wait to go toe-to-toe with our friend Philip Hardy. Phone number's here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And our friend Kevin Wood posted this concerning Dr. Kustra, who apparently is doing the media tour, talking about his time left at Boise State. And he got an interview with the Idaho Statesman. They posted it to Facebook. Let's take a listen where he says that Boise is a baseball town.
Well, I think if you take a look at baseball as a sport, you have to look at the fact, first of all, that this is a real baseball town. This is a good high school. I don't have to tell you that, Chad, but this is a good high school baseball community. So, and of course, with the Hawks being in town over the years, there's really been the opportunity to grow a fan base around baseball. We did have to make a decision to drop a sport. And while I know there's many wrestling advocates out there, they can't compete with the America's national pastime. And they can't compete.
Now, stop the tape there. First of all, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, I'm going to out myself. I am anti-baseball, so my bias is I'm really not down with baseball. And the idea that you're going to, and I'm pro wrestling. Look, you talk to some of the toughest individuals in life, those are wrestlers. And I want to thank Kevin Wood for posting this. I want to thank Kevin Wood for acknowledging the Kevin Miller Show here, that we will, obviously give folks a voice. We will listen and not just be the mouthpiece of, established institutions. And as I said, this is going to be a mark on Dr. Custer's reign, along with Jeff Sessions attacking Boise State for lack of free speech for students, along with the issue involving the debacle that was going to the Big East and then coming back to the Mountain West, and along with this situation involving baseball. I don't believe that we are a baseball town. If we were, we would have a double-A team instead of a limited A-ball. Now, the Hawks, they're owned by a guy in Georgia. He seems like a nice young man, an astute business person that has gotten together the usual suspects to milk the city of Boise out of building a stadium for him. I mean, think about this. And again, I am hard on people that live in Boise. It's probably stupid because there are more people that live in Boise than let's see, you put Meridian and Nampa together and maybe throw in Caldwell, and you have more people than in the city of Boise. Let's throw in Kuhn and Starr as well. But I've always looked at this show as a Treasure Valley show. because the city of Boise continues to vote for liberal tax spending, not tax saving politicians. And that's not a personal attack on politicians in Boise. They spend your money. Look at the lead story. Listen to the lead story from Maggie O'Mara today. We're going to extend in the city of Boise the parking, which is horrific to begin with, on the streets till 7 o'clock at night. And then on Saturdays, they're going to charge you for parking. Is that welcoming? Now, if you're a bicyclist in Boise, these are good times. If you're a business person, if you're a person that drives these things called cars, in my opinion, not very friendly. Now, I could be wrong, but Dr. Custer talking about a baseball town, I don't think that we are. And again, what does this have to do with how we're rolling? You're looking at a downtown stadium that is going to be an ode to minor league baseball that doesn't even run a whole season because the summers are too hot, and minor league soccer. I don't think that there are enough soccer people here either. And remember, with all due respect to soccer, it's a socialist sport. I'll explain that in a minute. Time for traffic. And let's go to Liberty Linda with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Liberty Linda.
Yes, good morning, Kevin. I would vote for Roy Moore. I believe this is all politically motivated. I believe it's all about building a wall on our southern border. And I think the two of them should get together with witnesses, talk over what happened, if they can remember 40 years ago, and then come to a conclusion. And then we should get on with our business. That's what I think should happen.
Well, I don't think this person wants to talk to Judge Moore. And knowing Judge Moore personally, I don't think he wants to talk to her.
Well, if they did it with witnesses in private, I think that would be the logical thing to do. Whether
she believes that she was wrong. So what would that cure? What would that cause? What would that mean as far as making a difference?
I think that it's a logical thing to do. If the two people want to come to, together, what happened 40 years ago, talk it over with witnesses. And, that's just what I think the easy thing would be. But as I said, I think it's all political and motivated in the first place. So, I think that would be the logical thing to do, not that they would do it.
Logic in politics. That's a good one.
Yeah, I agree with you. But anyway, I do think it's all about building the wall. Republicans want the wall built, most, and Democrats do not want it built. So anyway, I think that's the motivation for all of it in regard to Roy Moore. I would vote for him. 40 years ago, do we remember? And anyway, there is forgiveness in this world, I believe. So I would forgive, and let's move on.
Well, would you forgive Charlie Rose?
Wow. There's in each case, it's different. Let me just put it that way. And so in each case, I think these things should be handled privately, regardless of who it is. And if they need to be fired from their job.
I don't think you answered the question.
Yeah, I'm tiptoeing around all of it.
What, are you running for office?
Because no, I'm not. Because in each case, it's different. It's different in each case. I think it's politically motivated.
Okay, Liberty Linda, I got to run, but thank you.
Okay. All right, Kevin. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Kevin Miller in the morning. Fox News next. Stay tuned. Stay informed. KIDO Talk Radio.